and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Tommy Sorang with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. Now, one of the most talked about news items in recent weeks came out of Thailand. The dramatic rescue of a boys' soccer team who was stranded in a cave.
All 12 boys and their football coach have been found alive after 9 days of missing in a cave.
How many of you? 13. Brilliant.
Now, while the rescue effort itself made headlines across the world, the Thai government's careful media control throughout the operation also received the spotlight. So in this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we'll take a closer look at the Thai government's close guarding of information related to the rescue operation and also engage in a broader discussion about the public's right to know. So going back to the Thai situation, the Thai journalists, Thai media outlets, they weren't allowed to disclose the names of the boys as they were being rescued, nor were they allowed to release video footage of the rescue operation. Do you think the Thai government made the right call in terms of restricting and controlling the flow of information? What's your take on this?
Well, a couple of things. First, in terms of identifying the boys, I think it's legitimate that they don't identify as the boys. They were minors, they were children essentially. So you would require, let's say, the permission. Anytime I would interview a young person, I would ask the parent if it's okay to interview that person, and I would be sensitive about them being a minor, being a young person. So I think the government has some cover there. The Thai government has some cover there. In terms of other issues surrounding the control of information and video coming out of there might be other ethical concerns. The Thai government does not want to appear that it is not doing all it can in terms of public safety. So, for example, when we had the death of one of the divers that was trying to rescue the boys or helping in the rescue, we didn't see video footage of him coming out of the cave.
Right.
I didn't see any photographs of him. Now, the government would definitely not want that to be released because it would be a sensational sort of news story that would show that the Thai government hadn't been doing all it could for public safety in terms of divulging people's names and forwarding this concern for public safety. It might be more appropriate to release the names of the officials that didn't curtail access to this relatively dangerous location.
So that might more serve the public's right to know the names of the officials?
Not to mention, while these boys were trapped in this cave, a boat, I believe, capsized in Thailand, and how many people died during that. I mean, there's plenty of safety concerns throughout Thailand, a country that depends on tourism for people to visit its waterways, caves, natural beauty. So yeah, this was certainly a sensitive issue for the Thai government.
So we could even say that they were using the issue of them being boys to protect themselves from broadcasting such a, possibly inflammatory story to the international community. They really also wanted to control the international press as well.
Right. Now, some say, given the global nature of this incident, the global interest in the situation, there should have been more precedence given to the public's right to know. What do you say to that, Ueno?
I think Thai government trying to infringe the right to know, or by hiding the name of the boys. And there's a conflict between media and government office. It's sometimes happen, I think.
Now, despite the government's informational control, some media outlets actually resorted to illegal measures. Some flew drones over the area. Others, they actually tapped into police radio frequencies. Why do you think they went to such great lengths?
They wanted to get the story. Sometimes journalists bend the rules a little bit in order to get the story. This overriding desire to get the best story that you can get. You see journalists bending those rules occasionally here in South Korea. In the cases of a journalist left their handphone in a party meeting and then left, and it was a recording the conversation that took place.
And there's so much competition these days for, especially in broadcast television, not only amongst broadcasters, but also you're competing against social media. CNN is competing against someone's YouTube stream right now. Who's going to have the best images from the site of a news story?
The local's perspective.
Sure.
Right. Now let's extend this discussion into high-profile individuals and coverage of their personal lives, celebrities, public officials, and so on. Some media outlets, citing the public's right to know, they often chase after these high-profile individuals into their private lives. In the process of getting information, paparazzi and journalists, they sometimes lead to, for example, physical violence, such as in the case of Sean Penn, actor Sean Penn, breach of patient confidentiality, as in the case of Farrah Fawcett, and even death, as in the case of Princess Diana. Do you think the paparazzi are justified in getting this information for the public's benefit?
No, I don't think they're justified. I think that paparazzi are really sort of sensationalist journalists. It sort of developed, decades and decades ago. The most famous case is Marlon Brando and Jacqueline Onassis, that were followed around by a particular paparazzi. And one time he was stalking Marlon Brando walking down the street. Marlon Brando actually punched him in the face, broke his jaw, went to the hospital, was sued, and paid out. But Marlon Brando didn't care. He just didn't want to be bugged by this person anymore.
There's no public interest
in
stalking
there's
celebrities.
There's no public interest there. It's just sensationalism. And the sad part is that work pays.
Right.
Those photographers,
right,
they make money. And the magazines that publish those photos, they make money as well.
Right. It's all very market driven, especially in the example of television. Commercial broadcasters depend on these types of images to get viewers, then to increase their revenue from advertisers. It's not healthy, but it's unfortunately what much of the public wants.
Right, so if you look at it from a free market perspective, then obviously supply and demand, there is a demand for these photos. This is what people like to see. That's what people click onto. If it's an internet news article, this is what they buy. If it's a tabloid, a magazine. But if we take a look at it from a professional ethics point of view, do the journalists and the media outlets, do they have a responsibility to select these stories and perhaps not accept work from paparazzi that have obviously been taken by infringing on the individual's privacy?
The media industry is in such bad shape right now, especially the print industry. Most outlets will take whatever they can get to get subscribers, to get readers, to get viewers. So unfortunately, when it comes to ethics, they go out the window when it comes to the bottom line. I
totally agree. What's interesting is what we're seeing in terms of celebrity paparazzi is celebrities taking control of the spread of their images in the media. In the case of, let's say, some weddings, we've seen some weddings where they have designated a photographer and given the photos to these magazines, People Magazine and stuff, that want the photos to prevent the sort of paparazzi circus that would follow a high-profile events like that.
But we need to make a distinction between the right to privacy of a celebrity and the right to privacy of public officials.
Right.
There's a big distinction there, and I think public officials have to assume by taking, if they're in an elected office, if they're being funded, if their salaries are based on taxpayers' money, there is a certain sacrifice of privacy that I think comes with that job.
Right. When I do agree that these paparazzis don't result in stories or pictures that actually serve any social benefit.
I think there is two information. That one is that people want to know, and the other is that people should know. And paparazzi or this kind of reporters are making the news that people want to know, but this is not not always a benefit of the socials or benefit of the citizens. So yes, this must be distincted strictly.
I totally agree. This is I think really the biggest problem in journalism today is that the public's need to know is being sacrificed for the public's desire to know. And I view journalism as feeding that need to know, and that need to know is a much smaller market. I can give you an example. I was watching television, you know, and they have the bottom third, which is a scroll that goes across, and then different stories. So, you know, 1 minute you're watching them talking about the summit and Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and the potential for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and then next up is the Stormy Daniels story. You know, and those two were going neck and neck to be the top story. I don't know that that's serving the public's need to know.
This is not a black and white issue, and I don't think journalists want to be accused of spoon feeding, you know, making, you know, consumers, you know, eat their vegetables, so to speak. We don't want to be too paternalistic to tell viewers that you need to know this. Like we can't dictate what the news should be. I don't have the answers, you know, how to walk this very fine line.
Right. Okay. Now, when there's a clash of interest, as there is for many of these cases, between the individual's right to privacy and the public's right to know, which takes precedence, which is more important?
It's a case-by-case basis. You need to look at the issue that's involved. In the case of the Thai boys, okay, how are we going to forward the issue of public safety in Thailand?
Right.
And will the identifying the boys and showing their bodies coming out of the cave, you know, forward that issue, that safety issue? Certainly it will provide sensationalism and more attention to the story. That story got an incredible amount of attention anyway,
it did, yeah,
without these types of images. But it's kind of a slippery slope towards censorship, and then a slippery slope in the other direction towards sensational and vulgar paparazzi. And you don't want to go in either direction too far. Hopefully the Thai government maybe is under a little bit more pressure, given the other accidents that happened in the country at the same period, to do more for public safety there.
Okay, now let's delve into the legal debate surrounding some of the coverage. As we saw in the Thailand situation, sometimes journalists resort to illegal methods to document the event or to uncover truths. So in these sort of situations and others where illegal actions have taken place, wiretapping and document leaks, in order to uncover corruption or illegal actions committed by the state, do the ends justify the means? I
think they do, and I think that the uncovering that information needs to be protected. Those whistleblowers need to be protected. Mm-hmm. So for example, I think in the case of Edward Snowden, he probably signed, or implicit in his employment was a non-disclosure agreement that he wouldn't divulge information when either during his employ or after he was finished working with the organization. That he wouldn't, again, divulge information afterwards. I think that such a non-disclosure agreement shouldn't apply to illegal activities. And the government is using that and applying it to illegal activities and saying you can't divulge that because you signed a non-disclosure agreement. I think that non-disclosure agreement becomes void when the government is behaving in egregious ways.
I overall agree with protections to whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, and I think he released his information in a very careful and methodical way, whereas some other leakers, I'm thinking of perhaps Chelsea Manning, who before she underwent a gender reassignment surgery, he was a soldier in the American military and released to WikiLeaks secret, sensitive American military information. I think disseminating top secret material that way is certainly less responsible than what Edward Snowden did.
Do you agree, Ueno? Do you think the ends justify the means in these sort of cases?
It's hard to say specifically yes or no, but
Sure.
it depends on the situation. But basically, what I think basically is the results should justify the means, because even if we do something illegal, if this means revealed something that's more illegal, or maybe something illegal by the government or government officials, this going to be a benefit for the citizens of the nation. So of course it's case by case, but basically results should can justify the means.
Okay, let's move on to the safety of journalists compared to the public's right to know. As we saw in the case of the Thailand situation, natural disaster or just disaster situation, they attract a lot of spotlight, a lot of media attention. But sometimes these situations, these zones, they come with a lot of health and safety risks for the journalists covering the situation on ground. Have you had any experience such where you covered a story on ground but had grave health and safety risks?
Sure. In 2010, I visited Yeongpyeong Island, which had been a few days before my arrival, had been attacked by North Korea, and several South Koreans died during that attack. Now, I asked my client, the radio station that I do work for, if they wanted me to go there, and I guess they felt that it was safe enough for me to travel to the island. However, when I was there was, I believe, North Korea put its rockets back on the launch pad, and I was evacuated into a bomb shelter. You know, sirens were ringing around across the island. I spent about a half hour underground in that shelter, the closest I've ever been to becoming a war correspondent. But certainly, it went through my mind, like, you know, am I going to be involved in another attack? You know, was coming to this island worth the safety risk? I love my job, but I don't want to die for it either. Fortunately, I emerged unscathed and actually put together a very good story after I returned.
Ueno, I know that in 2011, Japan suffered a massive earthquake and that you covered it on ground.
Yes.
Did you experience any health and safety concerns?
Yes, I actually went to the Iwate prefecture, where was we had a big damage by the flood and earthquake near the Fukushima. And everything I saw there was my first time. There's things that I never seen before. On one night, I get into the one building where used to be a supermarket.
Okay.
And I took many photos and made memos. And then little earthquake had suddenly occurred, and the building was like shaken. And then I came back to myself, and I may die, or I'm really in a dangerous situation.
Well then, along the lines of what you said, Jason, if you could have your time again, would you go there again, knowing that there would be a residual shape?
Of course, I'm a journalist, so I'd like to cover that situation, but now I also have a family. I have a wife, I have my kids, and I have to think about it.
Okay.
Actually, you know, I work for Press TV. One of our journalists covering Syria was actually threatened and then targeted by a sniper and killed. This is a few years ago. So there is definitely a danger covering these combat zones, these conflicts. Most often, though, journalists aren't killed in combat or from crossfire, but they're targeted. They're murdered in doing investigative journalism work, as well as targeted when they're in the field. Actually, it's an irony that they wear that press often. You see journalists with a press vest. I wonder sometimes if that's not a target.
This has, especially now in the battle, the war in Syria, the fight against ISIS, there's been many ethical questions raised about the role of freelancers covering these events. Many news outlets won't send their staff correspondents into these war zones, but yet will take content from freelancers who often have no protection. They're earning very little money. They don't have health insurance. They don't often have someone to advocate on their behalf. And I mean, it was a few years ago that James Foley, an American freelancer who was working for some media outlets, was beheaded by ISIS. And there had been other American or Western journalists had been killed covering the war zone. They'd been kidnapped, murdered by ISIS or other militia groups, and there's really no accountability on behalf of media outlets. Now, I know some of the clients that I've worked for, they refuse to take contributions from freelancers in dangerous situations.
Because?
Well, I pitched a story once to go to the Philippines, to Mindanao, where there has been insurgency developments over the years. There's been, against groups affiliated with ISIS or other Islamic extremist groups. My editor refused to condone me going to that and said that she would not take any reporting from me if I went there as a way to discourage me from going to a dangerous situation. And I felt that I was disappointed. I would have liked to have done the story, but at the same time I understood that my client doesn't want to be on the hook in case something terrible took place.
And what about for Japan? Is there a guideline among the Journalists Association or the professional body or by your own company, some protocols about how to cover conflict zones or disaster zones?
Yes, in the disasters case, we may have the guideline from the association, and also we have each company's guidelines too. In the case of my company, we made actually brush up the guidelines on reporting on the nuclear power plant. For example, in the basement from the 30 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, the basement has to have iodine tablets or Tyvek suit. These kind of things are more newly guidelines after the 2011 because of our experience.
Right. I'll move on to the last question for today. What motivates you as journalists, despite all these fine lines, slippery slopes, and even physical danger to your health and safety? What motivates you to keep going forward?
Maybe this is a little cliche, but I just want to tell a good story. I want to shed light on an event, on a story, or maybe even profile an interesting person that wouldn't have otherwise gotten attention. And I think as a foreign correspondent, I'm telling stories mostly to, in my case, American listeners or readers. I can enlighten them in some way.
Anyone else? What motivates you?
One thing is that I like to know something new before the other people know. And the other thing is that I like to tell the people something new or something I knew. I'd like to make society a little bit better.
Well, for myself, I want to share with people a perspective on news events that they already know about. Mostly that's what I do. I cover general news that people, they get a perspective maybe from mainstream media, and I want to give them a different perspective that I think that they need to take a look at.
Then perspective that they need to look at, you mentioned that. When you're faced with that decision of having to choose between a story that you think the public needs to know but is perhaps not popular, it won't get the views, it won't get the clicks, it won't get the sales, versus stories that the public wants to know but perhaps is sensationalized, which one do you go for?
Certainly the one that I think they should know about. And unfortunately, I think with some of my clients, and I think public radio is kind of a different animal in this zoo of journalism, that they often encourage, my editors have often encouraged me to find these sort of nuanced stories and stay away from the big picture story and tell a sidebar story that somehow perhaps sheds light on a bigger news event, but from a very specific angle.
Okay. And Frank?
I would love to choose the story that's need to know, but I think with all media, whether it's commercial or state media, it's driven by those clicks. It's driven by the viewers. So I'm always under that debate. What I try to do is I try to sort of feed the beast, is what we say in broadcasting, and give them the stories that they want and that they think that the viewers and news consumers want, and at the same time sneak in the stories that I think that viewers need.
Right. When you're faced with that decision, what's your choice?
I would like to say I have to report on something that people have to know. I'd like to say is that even if we are not free from the commercialism, we are trying to let people know that what is people should know. We are trying, keep trying anyway.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Thank you. So today we started off with a discussion on the Thai government's careful media control of a recent cave rescue operation and engaged in a wider debate about the public's right to know. And we leave you with the following quote from the late American news anchor Walter Cronkite, which gives us a perspective on what it means to be a journalist and what the true role of the press really is. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.